Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Ayushi Paliwal from University of Delhi. So students, today we are going to talk on the module What is Nanoscale from the paper Physics at Nanoscale. After completing this module, you will be able to know the following things. First, nanoscale and the importance of their size. Second, surface to volume ratio. Third, biological processes at nanoscale. Lastly, we will also discuss about macromolecular devices. So students, let us start with a basic introduction about the module. What is nano? Nano is billionth of a unit, that is 10 to the power minus 9. Properties of any material strongly depend on its size, as the phenomena determining these properties are size dependent. The most dramatic effects are observed when the quantum nature of objects starts dominating these properties. These effects become observable at the dimensions approaching the de Broglie wavelength of electrons in the material, which is typically of the order of 1 nanometer. So, now the question arises, what is nanoscale? The word nano, originating from the Greek prefix nanos, meaning dwarf, depicts a billionth of a unit, that is 10 to the power minus 9. Nanoscale materials or the objects therefore refer to the materials with sub-nanometer dimensions. To get a better feel for the dimensions, a nanometer represents the length scales tens of thousands of times smaller than the thickness of human hair. From the point of view of physics, a copper wire with the diameter more than 25 micron or a human hair and their interaction with the world are big, because they contains more than 10 to the power 23 number of atoms. Therefore, to explain the mechanical and other properties of the copper wire, it is required to solve either quantum or classical equations of motion for the constituent atoms. The particles on the nanoscale, however, exhibits unique properties. For example, bonding of a 25 micron copper wire, it is accompanied with the movement of copper atoms at the scale of about 50 nanometers. So, this is one of the reasons that the copper nanoparticles, which are smaller than 50 nanometers, they are considered to be extremely hard materials. However, they do not exhibit the same ductility as the normal macroscopic copper wire. In this case, it is justifiable to talk about the average mass density and the elastic modulus, which relates the elongation of copper with the tension, as predicted by Hooke's law. So, similar physics can be discussed in the context of the other properties of copper. These collective properties and their evolution in macroscopic systems are the foundation of condensed matter physics. But the foundation can't be applied in the case of deoxyribonucleic acid, that is DNA, which is topologically similar to a copper wire. It turns out that this is the only similarity and continuum physics which is so successful in the case of copper wire will fail miserably to explain the mechanical, the electronic, and optical properties of DNA. But at the fundamental level, both the copper wire or human hair and DNA, they are made up of stable atoms. Largely, the purpose of this paper is to examine and describe the different properties of condensed systems at nanoscale. It is required to reach a translational threshold where the different properties of nanosystems will no longer be described by classical physics.
Now students, let us discuss about the different nanosystems. So first, atoms and molecules, they are probably the smallest nanosystems. Here the electrons are confined in three-dimensional quantum well. Next type of nanosystem is a cluster. It is nothing but a collection of units which can be atom or reactive molecule of up to about 50 units. The third nanosystem which we are going to discuss is colloid. A stable liquid phase containing the particles in the 1 to 1000 nanometer range. A colloid particle is the one such 1 to 1000 nanometer particle. Next is nanoparticle. A solid particle in the 1 to 100 nanometer range that could be non-crystalline, an aggregate of crystallites or a single crystallite. The last type is a nanocrystal. A nanocrystal is nothing but a solid particle that is a single crystal in the nanometer range. Now continuing our discussion over nanosystems, the nanoparticle or nanocomposites made from the particles of nano-size ceramics or metals smaller than 100 nanometers, they can suddenly become much stronger than predicted by existing models in condensed matter physics. Now, metal nanoparticles with the size of around 10 nanometers are as much as 7 times harder and tougher than their ordinary counterparts, with grain sizes in the micrometer range. Now, the nanoparticle affects many properties such as melting point, boiling point, band gap, optical properties, electrical properties, magnetic properties. Even the structure of material changes with respect to size.
Now, students, let us discuss why is size important. Properties of bulk materials, they are averaged based on the collective behavior of billions of particles. Properties of all the bulk samples averages out to be the same. Individual behavior of the atoms and molecules is not taken into account, and it may be different. At the nanoscale, the behavior of systems deviates significantly from these averages.
So now, students, as we know that a size is a very important factor. Now, one of the important factor to decrease the size is that the surface to volume ratio increases. As you can see over here, there are 4 cubical boxes in this figure. The first cubical box is having the area of around 6 meters square, and all the 4 cubes, they have the same volume. Now, if we will break the cube into multiple cubes, the amount of surface exposed increases. That is, we can say, suppose we broke the block into 1 mm or 1 nanometer squares, as shown in the last figure, how much surface area would be exposed? 1 nanometer means it is equal to 1 by 10 to the power 9 meters. Now, if we'll multiply 6 multiplied by 1 by 10 to the power 9, the whole square, multiplied by 10 to the power 729, then this is equal to 6 multiplied by 10 to the power 9 meters square, which is nothing but equal to 14,82,632 acres. So, the conclusion for this is that as we are decreasing the size, the surface to volume ratio increases. As we can see over here, the amount of or the surface area exposed increases or enhanced. So, students, continuing our discussion over surface to volume ratio increases, several researchers have observed the properties of a material. They are based on intermolecular forces. In a given bulk material, the majority of the particles are in the interior of the material and are thus subjected two similar forces, whereas the particles of the surface experience forces simultaneously from the substance and also from the surrounding environment. This lends the surface particles a higher energy, and this effect is the reason for some interesting properties which are regularly observed at nanoscale. Now let us consider a simple rectangular solid of height h, length L and thickness T, such that each of these dimensions can be represented by a generalized dimension capital D, which represents the dimension on the same scale, that is the unit. Now consider the small f, which denotes the fraction or percentage of atoms at a surface relative to the total number of atoms in a given sample. The surface area and the volume V of the solid are given by S is equal to 2 multiplied by HT plus TL plus LH, which is equal to D dot D plus D dot D plus D dot D, which is approximately equal to D square. Now V is equal to HTL equal to D cube. Now small f is equal to S by V, which is approximately equal to D to the power minus 1. The above scaling law extrapolates to infinity as D goes to 0, which is unphysical but highlights the role of this scaling as we go to nanoscale dimensions. The greater surface area to volume ratio for small aggregations of substances as compared to larger aggregations leads to differences in the properties of the two. Now, surface properties are pivotal in determining the physical and chemical properties of the material. The larger proportion of the atoms which are on the surface has a profound effect on the processes that occur at the surface, including catalysis and adsorption, and changes the physical properties such as the melting point. Nanomaterials will show a lower melting point than the bulk materials with the same composition because lesser energy is needed to remove the atoms at the surface than those in the bulk. Now continuing our discussion over the increase in surface to volume ratio, the importance of surfaces can be understood by looking at a drop of water on a waxy surface, as shown in this figure. For instance, the force of attraction, known as cohesive forces of the water molecules to each other, is much greater than the force of attraction known as adhesive forces of the water molecules to the surface of the wax paper. This is responsible for the spherical shape of drops of the collection of water molecules and serves as the evidence for a high surface tension. However, when the surface upon which the molecules rest is changed to the one to which the molecules of water are more attracted, such as plastic, then the drop shape of water collapses. This is due to the fact that the adhesive forces between the water and the plastic, they are strong enough to overcome the cohesive forces between the water molecules. Now, as you can see over here, there is a sugar cube and there is a powdered sugar. So students, which will dissolve faster? On a macro scale, the properties remain the same even if the size decreases. For example, sugar cubes and powdered sugar, they can both dissolve in water. On a nanoscale, the properties changes, that is, nano sugar may not dissolve at all because more atoms are at the surface and more of the sample is surface. Whereas for a macro sample, there are as many atoms can be inside as are on the surface. Dissolving occurs when the solute is in contact with the solvent. Now students, as you can see over here, there is a steel nail and there is a steel wool. The question arises, which will burn? The answer is steel wool. Now when iron oxidizes, it creates heat or the flame. So the more surface area, more oxidation occurs because there is a greater possibility of iron colliding with oxygen. Now students, let us consider the case of gold. Nanoparticles often have expected visible properties because they are very small enough to confine their electrons and produces quantum effects. That is, photons are released or absorbed when electrons move within the atom. Now, as you can see over here, as the gold goes from a bar to coin to flakes, as shown in these figures, the color remains the same. As you can see in the last figure, which shows the gold nanoparticles change in color depending on the size. That is, they appear deep red to black in solution. So students, let us now discuss the random molecular motion. Random molecular motion becomes significant and it is exhibited by the constituent molecules or atoms of a substance by virtue of their
thermal energy. This motion can be translational, rotational, or vibrational. At the macro level, this random thermal motion is small as compared to the size of the substance. That's why we can barely detect the motion of dust particles on the surface of water. So, while at nanoscale, random motion becomes significant when compared to the size of the particles exhibiting it. Thus, the molecules that make up the dust particles are moving wildly as compared to the size of the object. The momentum of an object determines how easy it moves, or it can be moved, or how easy it changes its direction of movement if it is already in motion. This easiness depends on how smaller the object is, and this easiness facilitates the random motion known as Brownian motion of particles suspended in a fluid due to their collision with the fast moving atoms or the molecules in the fluid, which can be gas or liquid. So even the pollen grains, which are typically between 6 micron and 100 micron in diameter, are too large to exhibit the Brownian motion or random motion, which is seen in the particles of a few microns or less. This can be better understood by an analogy.
Biological processes at nanoscale. Nature has almost perfected the art of biology over billions of years by the millions of processes that occur at nanoscale. Most of the inner workings and functions of cells occur at nanoscale. All the information and the processes of life, they are encoded in a strand of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, as shown in this figure, which controls growth, development, functioning, and reproduction of all known living organisms, including bacteria and viruses. DNA is located in the cell nucleus, and the information encoded in DNA is stored as a code made up of 4 chemical bases, that is adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. All the control processes occur in a 2 nanometer diameter strand. The 2 helices in the DNA strand, they are held together by a large number of hydrogen bonds. At a bulk level, hydrogen bonds are weak, but due to large surface area at the nanoscale, these small bonds become increasingly relevant. Another example, that is hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in the human body is a little over 5 nanometer in diameter. Recent research activities and subsequent understanding of biological processes at nanoscale are leading to target specific smart medicine and impacting other fields such as the use of nanoscale biological principles for molecular self-assembly, self-organization, and photosynthesis as a model for green energy nanosystems for inexpensive production and storage of solar energy.
Macromolecular devices. Nearly all electronic processes, they occur at the macromolecular or at the molecular level by means of charge transfer. The use of molecules to make electronic devices such as wires, rectifiers, transistors, etc. is yet another field of research that we can associate with the nanoscale, with sizes of molecule falling in the range from 1 to 100 nanometers. So molecules themselves are used as devices with their bonds as electronic components. So at these scales, the transfer of a single electron from the source electrode to the molecule can change or can charge it, and the increase in the amount of energy required for the subsequent transfer. Carbon nanotubes, they are a class of materials that shows promising probabilities for use as macromolecular electronic devices. So students, let us summarize what we have learnt in this module. First, as the nanoscale is reached, the properties of the materials shows significant deviation from its material properties. Second, the surface area to volume ratio is higher for small aggregation of substances at nanoscale as compared to larger aggregations and leads to difference in the properties. Next, at macro level, the random thermal motion is small as compared to the size of the substance, while at nanoscale, random motion becomes significant when compared to the size of the particles exhibiting it. Next summary or the next conclusion is that the biological processes at nanoscale, they are leading to target specific smart medicine and impacting other fields such as the use of nanoscale biological principles for molecular self-assembly, self-organization, and photosynthesis as a model for green energy nanosystems for inexpensive production and the storage of solar energy. Thank you.